What's up, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of The Lawyer You Know. And as I was doing research for the podcast this week on the Canton PD audit, a ton of you guys sent me this interview with Billy Bush and a retired Canton PD sergeant. And you were like, whoa, you've got to watch this. You've got to listen to this. This is great. Karen Reed should use this. They should use him as a witness, other people he talks about. So I'm going to listen to it, see if there's anything they could potentially use at trial, and see how this interview goes. I'm sure we will learn something here together. So this interview is on a YouTube channel called Hot Mics with Billy Bush, who is a radio TV host, and he has brought on his channel a retired Canton PD officer to talk about the investigation, to talk about the Karen Reed case. Obviously, he knows a lot of players involved. He knows a lot of the policies and procedures involved. And let's see what he has to say.
He spent 3 decades in law enforcement and retired as sergeant in the Canton Police Department. His name is Peter Murphy, and he joins me right now. Sarge.
By the way, as soon as you hear Peter Murphy, you can hear from his accent where he's from. 30 years on the force, not somebody that wants to just throw cops under the bus unnecessarily. Okay, I think that's important. I think Billy Bush does a really good job setting that up with his experience, and almost even more importantly, at the very end, I think it's really important to always remind everybody when we talk about potentially bad cops or bad investigations that there are a lot of good cops and we need to support them and we need to highlight them. And he says that at the end and saying, this is one of the good ones, which I love highlighting and pointing out. I love cops. I love first responders. We need to support them. I support them. So we need to focus on doing that, but not at the cost of refusing to call out bad cops and bad police behavior, which this cop agrees with.
It is very good to see you. Thank you for your service to the police. Let me ask you, like, what would you have done if you were still on duty and you had arrived at that house? Would you, I mean, the fact that the guy never went in, would you would have gone inside, right?
Yeah, Billy. I mean, there are certain protocols and just kind of definitely rules of the road for crime scene investigation. Policies and procedures. There's dead body procedures. There's suspected mortal wound procedures. The main thing you try to do is preserve the crime scene, and immediately, in conjunction with that, Billy, you want to do an exigent search for perhaps other victims. In other words, anybody that responded to that scene would have and should have known the Brian Albert's involvement with the Boston police as a fugitive supervisor and gang unit, and any call for service to that house should have brought all the officers on duty that day for anything. Body on the lawn, shots fired, suspicious car, all boots on the ground on the police department working that shift would have responded.
And not.
So he's saying that as somebody who knows how they work, knows their policies and procedures, I'm going to try not to touch on the audit as much as I can to save that for the conversation with my dad coming out Monday. He said the word exigent search, just for a point of clarification. I don't believe from anything that we've learned from this case that there would have necessarily been an exigent circumstance where they could have forced their way into 34 Fairview. Meaning you can do that if you hear gunshots inside or somebody tells you, I saw inside the window, someone is beating up his friend or his wife or their husband or whatever it may be. Then cops can have exigent circumstances to go in there and protect the victim or to stop a crime. If somebody's cooking drugs inside, they can go inside to stop a crime. Or if they see somebody lighting evidence on fire, to stop the destruction of evidence. There's all sorts of exigent or extreme or pressing, demanding circumstances where you can force your way into a house without a warrant. I don't think they had that here. What they definitely had was a reason to believe somebody inside the house where a body is found on their lawn might have information about what happened. And if they don't, we need to at least cross them off the suspect list and make sure what they're saying is true and be able to confirm what they're saying. So at least the knock on the door, hey, can we talk to you about this cop's body on your lawn? Maybe, do you know this guy? Were you with him last night? Once those answers are yes, the ball starts rolling. Or they could say no. And then you'd have to present enough evidence for a search warrant to search the house. But none of that was done. And he does mention that. But I want to just clear up in case anybody thought he said they had exigent circumstances to go inside the house.
Only did not, they all didn't respond, but Brian Albert himself an investigator with a lot of experience in this area, never left his house. He never went out to look what was going on, never checked on the body, never did anything. So back to your, position here in the community. Are you comfortable, drawing up some big question marks and raising some doubts as to what actually went on here?
Are you comfortable bringing up question marks and raising some doubts? Are you comfortable as a cop, retired sergeant, 30 years in Canton, right? Because one of the theories is everybody's too scared. Everybody's in cahoots with each other. Everybody's colluding. Everybody's in on this conspiracy. Let's see what he has to say.
Yes, as I said, Billy, I reversed my my conception of what happened back in April of 23. And I have been very out front with criticism and providing information on different media sites in Canton.
April of 23 is where he changed course, he said. So over a year after this happened, he changed course. It's interesting, right? Because I would assume, like most people, especially a retired cop, he believed the cops and thought the best of it and gave them the benefit of the doubt and assumed the investigation was done well. But as more information come out, and he's going to talk about one very big ticket item that he has firsthand knowledge of, which again, this is the part that's frustrating because those of us that are not in Canton don't have the relationships he has, we don't have the people to talk to like he does. So we're getting things, from court, from trial, from other reports, from guys like him, but he forms his opinion based on people he's literally talking to that know all these people involved. And wait till you hear his involvement. Maybe you guys have seen an interview of his before. I have not. This is my first experience with him.
And you asked me what I would have done. You know, basically you secure the scene, you check for other victims, you secure witnesses, you try to isolate them so they don't talk to each other.
That's important. Isolate them so the witnesses don't talk to each other.
Maybe
Securing the scene, also important. More on that Monday.
you put their phones in a secure place so they can't call. Everybody's a suspect at 6:10 that morning when you got a dead cop laying on the lawn in another cop's house and the cop doesn't come out of the house. I mean, it's got some real questions immediately by 6:15.
So, and this isn't just, layperson Peter saying, how would a cop not come out? This is a cop saying it's weird a cop didn't come out. And that doesn't mean he's guilty at all. Just like if he would have said, I'm not talking to you, call my lawyer, you can't come in without a warrant, the cops would have been like, that's fishy. And whether they admit it or not, it probably would have made him more of a suspect and they would have looked into him even more. But they didn't even get that far. They didn't even ask those questions. I think that's what he should do, by the way, if you're ever questioned by cops.
Any officer on scene and any supervisor, including the deputy chief right across the street from number 34, who was home, he should have come out and established himself as the incident commander. They should have put a command vehicle on the way, which they had access to through Metrolec. They could have got school buses. There's so much. They did nothing according to protocol.
And so I don't know, I would have pressed him a little bit more in this interview about the conditions, the weather, the snow, how cold it was, what time of day it was, and if they would have really had all boots on the ground and access to everything. Because if they did, that's even worse. If they didn't, because the conditions and protocols kind of change, regardless of what the crime is based on the weather, that's a big excuse throughout the trial that law enforcement said. I would have loved to get his take on that. Maybe there is an interview out there where he does explain that. I would have loved to get his take specifically on how the weather would have changed their protocols.
And shame on them. And I would suggest to you, they could have asked for a warrant. They could have asked for consent to go through the house. And I would doubt we'd be having this conversation today if that investigation was conducted properly, Billy.
Yeah, we're talking.
Interesting. So does he believe the conspiracy? Does he believe this happened inside that house and that if they would have gone in or asked to go in, at least we wouldn't be here today? Or does he think they would have found more evidence it was Karen Reed? I don't know. But that's a pretty strong statement that he led up with. Shame on them.
To a man with 3 decades of service, retired as a sergeant in the Canton, Massachusetts Police Department. This is where this whole Karen Reed event went down, where John O'Keefe, officer who was dating Karen Reed, died. She is now facing her second trial right now, and she's up against a lot. She's up against the state police. She's up against the state. She's up against I feel bad for the Canton police officer, the little guy this is the department for which you serve. This young guy, they're basically calling him an idiot because all he could find was, a cocktail glass and a shard. And, 2 hours later, a much more experienced guy and Michael Proctor finds a ton of broken taillight.
You can hear the sarcasm in Billy Bush's voice
Around the scene. I mean, that guy, could anyone be that stupid as to not see taillights? They're red.
Once again, in fairness, I would bring up the snow, the conditions, the time of the morning, everything going on, the hysteria, as at least being part of the equation. Not an excuse at all. We've been over this. Makes no sense how it all happened. They didn't secure the scene. The people searching weren't even cops. They don't even know who some of them were. I don't have to go through all of the problems with this investigation and what they did on the crime scene, but I do think the weather should at least be part of the conversation because I think it matters to the jury.
In the snow.
Yeah, I mean, Canton police threw a couple of police officers down there, Billy, and initially on the first call.
Billy did mention the snow. I'm just saying I think it should be a bigger part, I guess, of the equation.
But they never secured the scene. People were walking up and down the street. There's so much that they could have and should have done and they didn't do to preserve evidence and secure the scene. And two officers went into eventually and finally went into the 34 Fairview residence at 9 o'clock, which, as you know, quick math is it's 3 hours after they found a body on a cop's lawn and it was another officer. They waited 3 hours to go in and check for other victims that could have been in that house, knowing the business that officer, Brian Albert, was in. And 3 hours later, they decide to go in and have a coffee. And nobody really got interviewed in that house.
I think what he means when he says the business Brian Albert was in is that somebody could have been targeting his family and his friends and could have gone in there and done something to them. So for their protection, they could have been victims. Why didn't you go in the house for that reason? I think that's what he meant.
It's just in one sentence, I couldn't say to you, you couldn't have screwed that investigation up worse if you wanted to.
And did you
woof? You couldn't have screwed that investigation up enough if you wanted to, or more if you wanted to. It's about as bad as it gets from a Canton sergeant.
So maybe they did want to.
Did you get they?
So maybe they did want to. You get the vibe here of what's going on in this conversation.
Maybe they did want to. Yeah, that's the big question. Is this a big conspiracy? I mean, look, there is a fraternal order of police, right? It's a brotherhood. It's a family. It's a one for one, one for all for one type of mentality here. And could that stretch even to the most gruesome, extenuating circumstances, which is a murder cover-up?
That's the $100 question. I used to kiss my children goodbye every shift that I'd go out, not knowing whether I'd come back safe or sound. And the thin blue line, the culture is there. But I mean, at what point do you say to yourself, wait a minute, we're talking about a murder here. This isn't an insignificant event that we're going to back each other.
It is amazing what a good night's sleep can do for you in all facets of life. And so many of you have reached out and said you used my code for Dream. So I had to continue partnering with them. And thank you to Dream for sponsoring yet another video. I was just talking to my buddy the other day, same issue as me, falling asleep, no issue, but staying asleep is a problem. He's been prescribed stuff in the past that he had to stop taking. I gave him a little bit of Beam to try, and now he's in, just like so many of you are. Dream is a revolutionary approach to sleep with natural, sleep-supportive ingredients in the form of guilt-free chocolate milk. And yes, I like to drink it as chocolate milk. Some of you drink it as hot chocolate. Either way, it works. There's no added sugars, only 15 calories, gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan, non-GMO, and keto-friendly, and it works. Facts of the matter, it works. So get the sleep you deserve with up to 35% off Dream. Just click the link in the description, shopbeam.com/Peter Tragos, and use code LYK at checkout and tell your friends because this stuff is awesome. So if I could pick one nit with what he said, because I'm going to be fair, okay? Even though I agree with a lot of what he's saying, that's a problem. To say this is the most serious of crimes, are we really going to back each other up? This isn't just some insignificant thing that we're backing each other up on. And the problem with that is if it's really insignificant and it's like I popped a tire because I picked my kid up from school and dropped him off and I shouldn't have, versus it's insignificant. This person said, don't search me, but I did search. I think that's insignificant as a cop. So let's just back each other up on it. Your definition of insignificant and what cops think are insignificant and what the law thinks is insignificant, I think would be considerably different, which is why it's not up to individual people's judgment, especially cops, to determine what's significant or not significant to back each other up. And in fairness to him, I don't know what he means by back each other up, but I would want to make sure it's clear that it's never okay for officers to break the law, even if they think it's insignificant. It is always the right thing to do to follow proper police protocols and procedures, regardless of what you think, because that's why they are there. And they are there for the citizens' protection, which is what you should care about as cops. So I just wanted to make sure that we didn't just gloss over that. I'll back it up so you guys can hear it again to make sure I'm not being unfair to him.
Fair, but I mean, at what point do you say to yourself, wait a minute, we're talking about a murder here. This isn't an insignificant event that we're going to back each other up. I mean,
and there's no way. I mean, like, look, I mean, we're rational people. It's not likely that someone said, I'm going to kill this guy. Something happened. Tempers flared. Lots of alcohol was consumed. Sarge, you got a audit, right? You've got some actual paperwork that came out about this investigation. What can you share?
Yes, there was a very, very, very contentious vote in the town back in October. I think it was October of last year. And it was to petition the funding for an audit, an outside independent audit.
So now he's going to get into the audit and he's going to get into his thoughts, which is perfect to tee us up for Monday for what my dad and I thought. I'm not going to comment too much on what he brings up in the audit, but it is interesting to hear his perspective as a cop, what he thinks the audit said.
Audit to come in and check the police department. And I could show you, here's basically, if you don't mind me showing these just quickly, here's basically, I guess there's a total of 100. Well, yeah, I mean, there's 206 pages here, Billy, of
wow.
Table of contents. And then what I want to tell you is that they did come to a conclusion. And here is the evidence pack from the audit, the summarization, which they're going to go over Saturday at the Canton High School.
Independent on-site audit, an independent audit from location of the town of Canton Police Department. Okay.
Yes, sir. Correct.
And what did it? In short, it said a terribly botched investigation.
Yes, they conducted the investigation from November 18th until just, I believe, March 31st or 30th. But they address rules of evidence and crime scene searches, and they basically found some serious issues, which is on this page here. I could read it to you, or I can basically say that they botched the investigation is what the audit found out.
So here we go.
So their perspective is basically completely botched investigation. From how they're putting it out there, it sounds like it's really great for Karen Reed and her team, really bad for the cops. Again, hold on what my opinion and my dad's opinion is for Monday, whether we agree with that, disagree with that, partially, whatever it may be. We've got a lot to say about it. Over an hour. We went overtime on the podcast. I'm recording this on Saturday. That podcast we recorded yesterday on Friday. It's dropping on Monday. You're not going to want to miss what my dad had to say about it, especially.
We're going to see what happens this trial. I mean, the last one went from April 2024 and ended July 1st, 2024. And this one is underway. Who knows how much longer it'll last. The biggest travesty in the whole thing. A lot of people are talking about this judge, Beverly Canoni, because when the foreman of the jury, the original jury, handed her their ruling, she read it. But what she did not include, which was confirmed later by 5 out of 12 jurors, was that jury acquitted Karen Reed unanimously.
All right, so now we got to be really careful about how this is presented, because it sounds like Billy Bush is saying they indicated to Judge Canoni unanimously that they acquitted Karen Reed on counts 1 and 3, and that Judge Canoni was the one that blocked it. I don't believe at all that that is the case. So I just want to be careful on how we characterize this and discuss it. He may just be getting confused on some of the facts or the way he's determining it, or he was talking about the foreman a little bit as a retired cop and Judge Cannoni. So we'll give him the grace of, that's probably what he meant. But I just want to make sure that Judge Cannoni is not the one that saw that they acquitted him on 1 and 3 and refused to read it, although that might be what it may sound like in this interview.
On the charge of murder and leaving the scene, where they weren't in unison is on involuntary manslaughter, because she had a ton of drinks, so you can't say definitively that something didn't happen. But anyway,
so that was interesting too. She had a ton of drinks, factually, so you can't say definitively that something didn't happen. So all those double negatives mean a couple things. We heard Dave Portnoy and the other guys on his channel say she was probably drunk. She probably did it. It almost sounded in the same vein as that. But then he also said you can't definitively say something didn't happen, which we all know is not the burden in criminal court. You have to be able to definitively say something happened. It seems like Billy Bush is behind potentially thinking Karen Reed is innocent. But he mentions that, and I think he mentions it because there's probably some jurors that think that way. And we have to make sure that the prosecution is held to definitively proving what happened. Not being able to disprove something didn't happen falls considerably short of the burden of proof in our criminal justice system.
The fact that she did not read out the 2 acquittals means that the whole thing has to start over again, which is deep.
The fact that she didn't read out the 2 acquittals means we have to do it again. Again, I don't think that's the reason why, but we already talked about that.
Deeply unfair. A lot of people probably calling Judge Beverly Cannoni corrupt, I would imagine, too.
Yeah, that's going around. And just I want to bring 2 other points of information out, if you don't mind. It'll only take a second.
Yeah.
I was sitting in the courtroom during one of the hearings, and the defense team basically stated that the feds had provided 3,074 pages of exculpatory information and evidence to both the defense, the judge, and the prosecution. In that,
another interesting just characterization, 3,000 pages of exculpatory information. All 3,000 pages were exculpatory. It probably contained exculpatory information like the ARCA reports that John O'Keefe was never hit by a car, and those types of things. It's just, once people get rolling, and they start, spitting all these facts out, it's interesting how it comes out. And I think it's a lot of, what they think and what they believe. And I can be guilty of that too. Talking on here, thousands of words, hundreds of hours of discussing cases like this. So it's just interesting when you're listening back and able to Monday morning quarterback it, the things that you pick up.
Statement the defense also read and said that the ARCA people had said that there was no way those injuries on John O'Keefe's body were consistent with being hit by a motor vehicle.
Yeah.
And also that the case should not go to trial. It did not warrant going to trial. District Attorney Morrissey still pushed it into the first trial. And
again, I haven't seen all the documents that the feds turned over, but I highly doubt they said, I guess they could have, you shouldn't prosecute this case. Very unusual for a U.S. attorney's office to tell the district attorney, you should not. If they actually think you're doing something wrong and they do an investigation and charges come, fine. If they say, I'm not going to prosecute it, or our office wouldn't prosecute it, again, fine. I think this is probably a couple steps further than where the investigation actually went. If anybody has the documents where they actually said, you shouldn't prosecute this, and there's 3,000 pages of exculpatory evidence, I would love to actually see and read that. I don't think it's public, at least, unless this is something I haven't seen in this case yet. I'm going to back it up just to hear him kind of explain this again to make sure I didn't miss anything or misconstrue anything.
I was sitting in the courtroom during one of the hearings, and the defense team basically stated that the feds had provided 3,074 pages of exculpatory information and evidence to both the defense, the judge, and the prosecution. In that statement, the defense also read and said that the ARCA people had said that there was no way those injuries on John O'Keefe's body were consistent with being hit by a motor vehicle.
Yeah.
And also that the case should not go to trial. It did not warrant going to trial. District Attorney Morrissey still pushed it into the first trial, and here we are going to a second trial. And one other point I was going to make to you is when John O'Keefe's body was found out in the lawn. There was only a couple of inches of snow at that time. And if he lost a great volume of blood, which the autopsy showed, Billy, there would have been a pool of blood magnified around his body under his head where he would have drained out had he died there. So do the math. I don't believe, and I think evidence is going to show, and probably if the feds come into this case and take it away as a corruption case, perhaps under a RICO statute, I don't know, that blood issue is going to become very important, as is the taillight. And I was the one that brought the taillight into.
All right, before we get into his taillight story, him discussing it, that's his opinion. Maybe he would or would not be an expert enough to testify on that, but I think you're getting a little bit of how impactful it is to hear a cop explain just how bad the investigation was and how important it would have been for the defense to be able to have that expert. I really wish they would have been able to do it. I think it would have been a fair trial. I think it would have been putting truth and justice and transparency in front of this jury, calling out the problems in this investigation. I think it needed to happen. I think it should have happened. And I think it was the wrong decision by Judge Canoni to not allow it. And I think he's showing us how impactful that really can be. People on the thin blue line side saying this is not how it's supposed to be done.
Going to become very important, as is the taillight. And I was the one that brought the taillight into the arena because a friend of mine who worked on the job owned a body shop, and he actually took the taillight out, but they did no paperwork. He didn't appear in any reports, no chain of custody, no supplemental report. Very, very concerning and very suspicious.
So a body shop owner took the taillight out, didn't appear anywhere. Does the defense know about this guy? Has the defense talked about this or to this guy? Has the defense determined whether he needs to be a witness? That's weird to me. I feel like if he was this smoking gun, the defense would have him on the witness list. He would be testifying to the fact that he did take the taillight out. He wasn't on any reports. That's another kind of nefarious feeling thing. And I'm just surprised that we haven't heard, that this guy didn't testify in the first trial. It's just, these are the types of things that just keep coming out about this case that if they're true, they really are just so crazy.
Wow, your friend is the one who received the car and looked. You know the guy that received the taillight and took the pieces out.
Well, here's what he did. He took the taillight out of the vehicle, out of the sheet metal, and handed it over to the state police, I believe. But there was no paperwork, no documentation.
He took the taillight out and handed it over to the state police? This guy?
Anywhere. Oh. And when I asked him who directed him to do it, he declined to tell me. Which
Michael
is a little
Proctor.
But you can force him to tell you who did it, right? With a subpoena. Bring him to trial. Who told you to do it? That's crazy. You can absolutely force it. He can't say no unless he thinks it's going to incriminate him, and then he can plead the fifth. And if he wants to plead the fifth on the stand, as a result, in response to the question of who told you to take this taillight out, great. Don't threaten me with a good time as a lawyer. Like, what? This guy is absolutely somebody that could be called as a witness, and this sounds horrible and not how things are supposed to be done.
Pardon me?
Must be Michael Proctor.
Might be.
Who knows?
I don't have the receipt as to who did it because he refused to tell me, but he took it out, and basically, I believe there's a story out there that he told another retired.
And now we get to, there's a story out there that one guy told another guy who told this guy. So again, multiple levels of hearsay. We've got to take it with a grain of salt. Still interesting though, in connection with what he says he heard firsthand. This is all just kind of, and now you can see why some of this stuff doesn't come out of trial. Maybe the judge or somebody, maybe even the defense found it not to be reliable enough to really go down that path. I have no idea. This is information I'm hearing for the first time while we listen to this interview.
Police, I believe there's a story out there that he told another retired police officer that there was only a crack in that taillight and she backed into something solid. There were not 46 other pieces.
Right.
So there's a story that this guy, the mechanic who took the light out initially, says it was just a crack and not into 1,000 pieces. If this guy exists, how does the defense not have him? I just don't get that. I don't, that's something that's hard for me to wrap my mind around.
Right. And then, of course, at 5 o'clock in the morning, when she went to look for the body, she backed into a car. We saw it on a ring camera. And she backed into the car of John O'Keefe. Wow.
So you see where they are. He says she backed into a car. We see it. And the cop says 100% Billy. So you see where they're at, right? So again, even I think they tried to play this somewhat even-handed as much as they could, because Billy Bush was like, she drank a lot, so you can understand how people would say something didn't definitively not happen or whatever. He's trying to understand, what the jury is saying. I appreciate Billy Bush for doing this interview. I think it's a good interview. I think shedding light on this stuff, getting a take on the investigation, seeing the audit, and what this cop's response is to the audit of right where he used to work. So to me, this was really interesting. I appreciate you guys sending this to me. I feel like I learned from listening to it. There's 30 seconds left. We'll listen to the send off.
Oh, wow. Well, look, we may find out that there's some dirty cop action in the area, but we know one thing: there are lots and lots of great, clean cops who have served our communities, and one of them we're talking to right now, Sergeant Peter Murphy. I really appreciate your time. We'll be watching the trial, and we'll stay in close touch.
Thank you, sir. It was good talking to you.
All right. And like I said off the top, it's always good when you say there may be complete police corruption. There are bad cops, but there are a lot of good cops as well. Always important to remember that. I don't mind repeating it on my show multiple times as well. But you guys sent this to me. You wanted it. Hit that like button if you enjoyed it. It was definitely interesting to me, and yet another layer. This new mechanic guy. Maybe you guys have heard of this before. Again, I came into the first trial not knowing anything, so most of what I learned started in the first trial. That guy didn't get called. Who the heck knows, right? So that's all we got for this one, but make sure you don't miss our podcast on Monday where my dad and I break down that audit in full. But until then, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.